get started, this is a regular scheduled board meeting for the Edgewood City Schools Board of Education. Mrs. Hansel, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Gabbard?
Here.
Mrs. Ashcraft? Mr. Messerschmidt?
Present.
Mr. Pressler?
Here.
Mr. York?
Here.
All right, would you please stand for the pledge and remain standing for prayer after. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pray with me. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful that we can come here to this place today, tonight, to transact the business of this school board, of this school system, of this community. We pray, Father, that your influence will be first and foremost in all the decisions made. We pray, Father, that any discussion that transpires, that it be of a humble nature and of a humble heart. And we pray, Father, that we all come together here now, that we are here as in our everyday lives to do your will and to glorify your name, because it's in your name that we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Arnold. I'm going to look for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Mr. York, do I have a second?
A second.
Mr. Messerschmidt. Mrs. Hansel, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Messerschmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Pressler?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Unfortunately, we won't have a presentation like last month, but I think we'll be able to get back to some more of that in the near future. Next, we will go to public participation. Mr. Herchanik, we'll start with you. Would you please state your name and your address, please? Before we get started, we're allotting 3 minutes per person, and we're going to stay pretty close to that time.
You start the clock after you get my name and address.
I'll start after you get your name.
Richard Herchanik, 137 East Ritter Street. The street address is Hamilton, but the location is the Village of 7 Mile, 45011.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please.
Since commanding 2 rifle companies in Vietnam, I'm going to take another risk. I'm taking a chance I might be on the FBI domestic terrorist list for confronting a school board. It seems to be the trend with Homeland Security, something unheard of. It's good to see new faces on the board. It's good to see old faces also. What I'm about to say comes from first-hand witnesses and second-hand witnesses. I'm basically repeating hearsay. I have no first-hand knowledge of a lot of what I'm going to say. My repeating this hearsay, as an attorney knows, is not allowed in courts, but in the military, and leaders in any profession rely on credible hearsay to make important leadership decisions. Our state test scores are supposedly declining. I do not know this, I've been told this. These test scores are a measurement of our students' learning. This affects our students' ability to excel and prepare for the future. One reason for the decline, in the opinion of some students, some teachers, and some administrators, and some other people in the school district, is cell phone usage. I didn't look before I came in because I sat in the front, but usually when you're in a place like this, you'll see people looking at their cell phones. And in the classroom, that is very Well, that's usually a no-no for most teachers. I don't know, what times have changed. Our policy manual is dated August of 2017. Cell phones are prohibited unless teachers' discretion allows their use. Apparently they're allowed to be used in between classes and during lunchtime. Student handbook, and I noticed, by the way, this will be approved later tonight, gives 3 strikes for violating different policies, including the cell phone policy. Once before COVID, I saw a sign in a restaurant saying, it was on the employee board, this is your final warning, cell phone usage equals termination. So they didn't give a first strike, second, as far as if you use a cell phone. Now they're begging for employees, so I imagine they changed it. Visiting educators coming to our school unfavorably comment about our cell phone policy. One word I had was the W word, which means worst. But I doubt they're the worst, but they didn't think much of our policy. Students sneak cell phones and sneak use of cell phones. One witness thought he or she saw porn being accessed by cell phone in the classroom. You on the board, some of your older ones may have been involved when a prominent daughter's electronic picture was in possession of some student athletes and caused some consternation. Students bring 2 cell phones, turn in one, they have the other one for use. Students wear earpods, earbuds, earpieces. Like I have my hearing aid in. It's believed this interferes with a teacher teaching. Earbuds allow cheating on tests. One witness said, gave a name. I'm not going to repeat any of that. Someone cheated using.
It's been 3 minutes.
earbuds.
Are you close to wrapping up?
Close to wrapping up. Middle schools experiencing problems with phones. There's a common belief that the policy is not being enforced. Solution, we have a member of another district on the board. Many in the district would like to do as Middletown does. Check your cell phone when you come into school, and you don't have it until you've departed. But in any case, there's a belief that cell phone usage is adversely affecting education. And this would be a good time at the end of the school year to modify it. And I see from the schedule that they're working on the handbook later on in the meeting.
Draft, so.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. Molly Broadwater, please.
I thought for my name and address too, right?
Please.
It's Molly Broadwater, 116 West Elton Road. First of all, thanks for having us here tonight. I do want to share my disappointment that this meeting is not being live streamed again. I know that the last meeting was a live stream, it was recorded, although that recording was never sent out over the social media networks or the regular updated or the regular announcements that we normally send out, which means less people saw it. Only 50 people saw it. We're averaging 300 to 800 people watching all the other ones. And it's a shame because that meeting had a lot of good stuff that should have been shared widely and we should have celebrated it. So I'm hoping that tomorrow, if this is being recorded, which I assume it is, that we will share it through our social media networks as well as an email announcement. It should be the board's top priority to make sure the things that are being discussed here tonight aren't just kept within these walls, but shared, because this is our community. And my understanding is this board and this administration wants to build a community, so involve the community, please. This week I've talked to a lot of parents who had some concerns about the school visitor policy. I know that there's a 5th grade award ceremony this Thursday, and that'll be only Zoom. And I know there are some parents that are concerned by that. I don't have a 5th grader personally, but I've heard a lot of concerns that it's only via Zoom and not allowed to be in person. I think Zoom's a great option. However, we should also have in-person options now. We should strive for that. Another complaint that I've heard recently, and this is my complaint as well, is there's not a kindergarten graduation. I know You guys might find that to be frivolous, but as parents, we find it to be very valuable, and also it's very valuable to build a community. It allows the community to come together, to meet the parents the kids are interacting with, to meet the staff, to interact with the staff. It's very disappointing. It's something that the 7 Mile community loved. It just feels like another thing that we're taking away from them. So I would encourage you in the future, I understand you can't do it this year, but I would encourage you to look to do it in the future. Just bringing that up, I hope that you guys look for more ways to involve the community. We want to make a community. We can't just put all the kids in the school and say we have a community. You actually have to bring in the parents and the community to have that. Thank you.
Thank you. Last, we've got Carleen Yeager.
Carleen Yeager, 4351 West Dalton Road. Again, I'm going to talk about board policy. This is taken from your own policy. The Board of Education has the dual responsibility for implementing statutory requirements pertaining to public education and for meeting the desire of the citizens. Citizens elect delegates to represent them. We endow these representatives with authority to exercise their best judgment in determining policy, making decisions, and approving procedures for carrying out the responsibilities. The board declares and thereby affirms, you guys approve this, to maintain two-way communication with the citizens of the district. The board shall keep them informed of the progress and problems of the school district, and the citizens shall be urged to bring their aspirations and concerns about the district to the attention of this body. They are to act as duly representative for the citizens in all matters relating to programs and operations. The Board of Education has been assigned specific authority through statute, and the board shall not relinquish or fail to exercise that authority. This is all taken out of complete context, but these are highlights. The supervision of the public schools of this district shall be conducted by the Board of Education. Code of ethics while serving as a member. You encourage ongoing communication among board members, the board, the students, the staff, and the community. Render all decisions based on the available facts and independent judgment rather than succumbing to the influence of individuals or special interest groups. Become informed concerning the issues to be considered at each meeting. Set clear goals for the superintendent. Devote sufficient time, thought, and study to proposed action. Establish clear goals for the district. Ensure that the community is aware of these goals. The executive part. The superintendent shall be delegated the authority to take necessary action in circumstances not provided for in board policy, provided that that action should be reported to the board at the next meeting following that action. Facilities planning. The Board of Education recognizes that careful, prudent planning is essential to the efficient operation of the schools, and that planning must be grounded on accurate data. You're having that data tonight, some of it. So hopefully you'll do more planning, and we get to hear it. In order to ensure that the future district construction supports the education programs and responds to the community's needs, the board will prepare a capital construction plan and will revise that plan periodically thereafter. We haven't heard any plan. We keep asking for a plan. It's been over a year. I would think at some point during the year we can hear a plan. Members of the board and administration have failed this community by allowing the decisions on grade level configuration by building to be implemented without the community's concerns being properly addressed. Board policy and procedures were not followed, and you're continuing to fail to allow for proper communication and the concerns of the district to be addressed and responded to. One other thing, following up from last month's meeting, Southwest Ohio Conference Assessment. You got a $25,000 fine because you didn't follow your contract. Who failed to read the contract, let you know what was in that contract, enact accordingly, so we didn't
All
have
right,
a $25,000 fine.
It's been 3 minutes. I appreciate your thoughts.
Okay, I appreciate your listening.
Thank you.
Hopefully, you'll
Thank
respond
you.
to me.
Thank you.
Before we leave public participation, we are recording this and it will get released
Correct.
tomorrow. Is that gonna come out in a
Correct.
email district-wide for parents to be able to click on?
We will make sure that it's put out there on YouTube, and we will send an email out, link out to every person that we have in the bank.
Thank you.
All right.
Just for information, where was last month's board meeting published or produced or presented?
It's on the website.
I found it on the website, but I
Found on
didn't
the
realize
website.
I didn't realize that nobody sent a message out to everybody.
Yeah.
So it was there, it was on the website?
Yes, it was there.
You had to know where to look to find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to know how to turn on your computer too. So I'm thinking if you turned it on and you went to our website, you might see it.
It takes some digging, Tom.
Yeah, I understand, but it was there.
All right. Next, we're going to go to treasurer items. Mrs. Hampton, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. The first item is the approval of the May 23rd, 2022 regular board meeting. Wait a minute, I'm sorry, geez, that's today. It's the April 26th, 2022 regular board meeting we're approving tonight.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve the board minutes of the regular board meeting, April 25th, 2022.
So moved.
Mr. Messerschmidt, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Pressler, any discussion? Mrs. Hansel, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Messerschmidt,
Yes.
Mr. Pressler,
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard,
Yes.
Mr. York,
Yes.
motion carries 4-0. The next item is to approve all the treasure items listed. The approval of the financial report for April 2022, the receipt ledger for the month of April, the check register for the month of April, purchase orders over $10,000, and then and now, purchase orders over $3,000.
I'm looking for a motion to approve the April 2022 financial report as presented.
So moved.
Mr. Messerschmidt, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. York, any discussion?
I do have a follow-up from what we talked about in April, I believe it was, with one of the purchase orders. We purchased 650 new computers to replace some of the computers that were being life cycled. There was some discussion around releasing those computers to people in the community who didn't have children in the community who didn't have them. Has there been any follow-up on that? Have we put a plan together to move those out of the school into people's hands that can use them?
Zach can talk a little bit about that. Zach, can you talk a little bit about?
Yeah, so, I mean, I did do, like, after I was at that board meeting, and after I heard the discussion, I did kind of reach out to other districts to kind of get a plan in place. I was actually trying to pull up my notes from that because it was a while back, but I did pull together some notes from what other districts do, and, I mean, I did put together a rough plan. I mean, I would have to pull up my notes. I could do that and go through them if you give me a couple minutes. But, basically, we would have to put together some form of form releasing us from, you know, kind of responsibility for taking care of the device once it's given away. And then kind of the biggest questions to answer are kind of procedure and kind of the scope of who are we giving these to. Are we just giving them, is it only available to students and they have to come during a certain date? Or is it available to the whole community and they can come anytime during the summer? You know, that could vary widely, and I mean, according to how we do it, it may influence demand. It could mean, you know, we have a bunch and we have to get rid of 650, and then at that point I would worry about my staff's ability to handle the demand. But if it was only, you know, available to graduating seniors, I mean, that's something we could throw together relatively quickly and at a low impact. And I mean, I did research how that would be done and look at what other districts do in that sort of situation. I mean,
So do you have a recommendation on a plan on what you would recommend to the board that we do?
I mean, I just threw together kind of some rough ideas and just ways we could do it. I mean, those are all questions that would have to be answered by, I guess, myself and other administrators. I know the easiest way to do it, or kind of it's necessary to not offer it until after school is ended, because we have to get those old devices physically out of the carts and the chargers out of the carts before they could be, you know, cleaned and processed and made available. So it would be something that would need to take place kind of towards the middle of the summer with some prep time, because we can't get a hold of them until school ends.
Would it be reasonable to think maybe this would be something we could do at the start of next school year?
Yeah.
Is that something that we're interested in moving towards, Gary, Russ?
Well, I believe absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't want this to fall off. It was something I had in my notes for follow-up, and since we were talking about POs and that was still pretty fresh, I'd like to maybe try to finalize a plan over the summer and try to get those in the hands of students who really need those prior to the next school year.
Yeah, absolutely. If you'd like to meet up, I can show you what I've worked on and kind of gathered information-wise, and kind of, I mean, I can go, you know, make a plan from there.
Okay, yeah, let's link up and we'll set up some time and go through it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
The only thing I wanted to add about these POs would be the POs over the 10,000. These are blanket POs.
And many of them are for July 1st. Yes,
For
we're
next
already
year.
starting for next year.
Right.
That won't be
Okay.
active until July 1st, but we can't wait till July 1st to set them all up because there's too many.
Sure, I understand. I just want to make sure everybody else knows. Which means we haven't spent this money, but
It's not even, PO's not even active yet, and it won't be until July 1st.
Okay.
Next year's money.
okay. Any more discussion? Mrs. Hanson, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Messerschmidt,
Yes.
Mr. York,
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard,
Yes.
Mr. Pressler,
Yes.
motion carries 4-0. The next item is a 5-year forecast, and I have a presentation, so if everybody wants to either turn around and be on the screen, if we're lucky.
Did a presentation.
How about that presentation? Presentation is about the 5-year forecast. Edgewood City Schools, I'm Molly Hansel, interim treasurer. And the first thing I want to go over is one of the requirements of a Board of Education is to submit a 5-year forecast. It's a projection of operation revenues and expenditures along with assumptions. We have to file this with Ohio Department of Education prior to November 30th and an update by May 31st of each fiscal year. The required funds to be included in the 5-year forecast are the general fund, any special cost center associated with the general fund money, emergency levy funds, any debt service activity that would otherwise have gone to the general fund. Those are all included in the 5-year forecast. The purpose and objective of the 5-year forecast is to engage the Board of Education and the community in long-range planning and discussions of financial issues facing the school district, to serve as a basis for determining the school district's ability to sign the certificate required by Ohio Revised Code 5705.412, commonly known as the 412 certificate. That certificate is saying that you have the money or the ability to pay this contract if you certify it. So if you certify a multi-year contract, you have to be able to sign a 412 certificate stating you have the money to do that. And also to provide a method for the Ohio Department of Education and the Auditor of State to identify school districts with potential financial problems. So before we get to the numbers, we want to go over a few things. A financial forecast is somewhat like a painting of the future based upon a snapshot of today. The 5-year forecast is viewed as a key management tool and should be updated periodically. In the financial forecast, the numbers only tell a small part of the story. For the numbers to be meaningful, one must review and consider the notes and assumptions before drawing conclusions or using the data as a basis for other calculations. The 5-year forecast encourages district management teams to examine the future year's projections and identify when challenges will arise. This helps district management to be proactive in meeting those challenges. The 5-year forecast is divided into 2 sections, revenues and expenditures. A district's revenue is made up of 2 main sources, local and state funding. The expenditures are mainly salary and wages, benefits, purchased services, and supplies and materials. This graph shows our general fund revenues, expenditures, and cash balance. The blue line is our revenues, and you can see that beginning in fiscal year 22 and beyond, it's pretty static. No increase, no major decrease. The red line is our expenditures, and they're sort of static for this year and next a little bit, but then they start trending upwards to where we are spending more money than we're generating or we're bringing in through taxes and state foundation payments. And then the green line at the bottom is our cash balance. And you can see that our cash balance is a little bit stable this year and next, but then it starts falling off because we're deficit spending. So our true cash balance this graph shows how many days we can operate with our cash balance at the end of the year. You can see in fiscal year 23, we have 80 days on hand. In fiscal year 24, we have 40, and in fiscal year 25, we have -3. So we've got a real problem coming up in fiscal year 25. And we are recommended to have at least 60 days true cash balance on hand at the end of any fiscal year. Our revenue, like I said earlier, comes from our 2 biggest pieces of revenue is state foundation. That represents 51.7% of our revenue here. And real estate taxes, call that the local share, and that's 40.4%. We have a very small piece that has other local pieces, and other state revenues is a small piece too, but our 2 main sources, state and local. House Bill 110, the Fair School Funding Plan, made many changes to the state foundation payments and expenses. It funds where students are educated. That started in July 1st, and we didn't see the results of that until January of 2022. This January is when our foundation payments reflected the new House Bill 110, Fair School Funding Plan. The school funding plan has us on a formula for 2022 and 23, and we assume that will continue. And that is the formula as opposed to the guarantee, where we don't fall into the formula, but we're guaranteed that our revenues won't fall below, I want to say fiscal year 19. I'm not exactly sure which year they used in that plan.
Molly,
But
what's
it's
the
good that
trigger?
we're on the formula.
What's the figure, or the trigger for that?
What's the trigger?
Yeah, to go from formula to,
I don't have that with me.
okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
House Bill 126 will severely limit our ability to challenge valuation reductions, which will impact property values and taxes. That House bill says we cannot, say if a big business comes in and they want to say, okay, now our value is way too much. We want to have our value lowered. They go to court, they try to get their value lowered. Before House Bill 126 was enacted, we could fight that, but now we cannot. And then we still have student wellness and the success funds are guaranteed as part of the base funding amount in House Bill 110. Some other items to consider about our finances. Our cash balance is positive through fiscal year 24. We have a substitute levy renewal in 2025. Our current funding model has us on the formula. The new state budget, House Bill 110, didn't provide us with substantial new money, and it's only good for 2 years, and the state works on another budget, their budget goes every 2 years. ESSER funds will help reduce general fund costs in fiscal years 21 through 24, and future funding is uncertain still for 24 and 26, as Fair School Funding Plan is not funded beyond fiscal year 23. Other proposals like College Credit Plus, excess costs, and tuition are expected to increase our costs going forward. Our general fund expenditures, the biggest part of our expenditures are wages and benefits. And wages and benefits both combined are an estimated 85.9%. Our purchase services have declined since fiscal year 21. So, and I think what that decline is the way that they're funding open enrolled students. It used to be an additional money coming in and additional expenditure going out, but with House Bill 110, it's all based upon students who are here. So if you're here, your county is here, whether you're open enrolled or not, we get the money for you. And then here's just a graph showing how all of our expenditures are increasing through fiscal year, well, through the rest of the forecast, fiscal year 26. That concludes my presentation, but I'd be happy to answer questions.
So a year from this July is when we run out of, we're no longer in a positive cash flow, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the longer that we go on passing a levy, does the millage actually go up on the levy then to make up for that deficit?
Yes.
Do you have anything on that?
I don't have that with me here tonight. No, but I can bring that next meeting. On the forecast, I can tell you that we always have to put a lot of things we think are going to happen into the forecast. So in years 23 and 24, I projected a 1% increase for salaries. And then in fiscal year 25 and 26, I didn't put anything in there for increase in salaries, 0%. Because you can see in fiscal year 25, we are in deficit spending to the tune of 353, well, our cash balance at the end of the year is negative $353,000. So when we flip this forecast over next year, next November's forecast is going to be 3 years out, and it's going to be a big negative number in there. And we're going to have to do some things. The district's going to have to make some tough decisions on how we're going to get revenue increase, because I can't, well, we're going to have to increase revenue or decrease spending. One or the other, or part of both. Yes, Mark?
What bucket of money did things like athletics and busing and things like that fall under?
Well, transportation comes out of general fund, but athletics has their own fund, and that's where the athletic money is not a part of the 5-year forecast. It's not part of the general fund.
What about facility improvements? Where does that come from?
Some come out of, very little comes out of general fund because we have a permanent improvement levy. So a lot of that comes out of our permanent improvement fund. Some of it comes out of classroom facility maintenance fund, the high schools does. And then we've used some ESSER money to also supplement that.
But that's not shown in these graphs?
No, because this is just the general fund. 5-year forecast is only for the general fund. Because any other fund is, you can only spend that fund for what you're allowed to by law. The general fund is the only fund that you can take and supplement, say, other funds, or do anything you want to with. Everything else is earmarked for a specific purpose.
So this building has an 034?
Yes.
Okay, where is that in that?
It's not in here because it's 034. It's a different fund. Just like permanent improvement is, that's 003, and that's not in here either.
All right. So does that relieve a little bit of the permanent improvement for the district then by having 034 for the high school?
Mm-hmm. Yes. It has more money, but the high school, it's new. It shouldn't really take a whole lot to keep this one going.
Right.
It's your aging buildings that cost money.
Right. You know, there was and this is something we talk about sometime, but there was a determination by school facilities one time that if the schools were on the same campus, they were letting us use O34 monies when they were on the same campus. I know that happened for Madison at one point, and it could happen here, I don't know. But I think it's determined by the communication you have with somebody in school facilities on it. So that could be one thing that we would look at.
We saw look at for the future, absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to say, Mr. Urchani gave me a couple suggestions for you, Chromebook. Zach, application, people do applications or we do a lottery. So let's write that down in a note. Those are good ideas that could go into that.
Okay, so the next item I would like to have is a motion to approve the 5-year forecast as presented.
Well, can we have some discussion?
Yeah, after.
On that? So,
Yeah, we gotta get a motion first.
okay.
So the motion, Mr. York, do I have a second? Second. Mr. Pressler, okay, any discussion?
So, I think this is an awful lot to take on in a regularly scheduled school board meeting. I kind of think that maybe this would be something that we would maybe want to schedule a separate workshop for to kind of come in and really have some of those discussions. You made the comment that the school boards, the school's going to have to make some tough decisions potentially between now and July 1st of 2023. So I think we need to probably start moving in that direction. I mean, I think everybody knows that we're going to need to put a levy on the ballot at some point, and if it doesn't pass, then we're going to have to start changing the way we do business. And I think we need to have a plan on what it's going to cost the taxpayer when we put it on the levy on the ballot. And I think we need to have a plan of what it's going to do to affect the school if it doesn't pass, so that we can be completely transparent with the voters. And if the levy passes, this is what it costs you. If the levy doesn't pass, this is what we're going to have to do. And I think we need to start having those hard conversations now. I think we gain nothing by waiting.
Any more discussion? Mrs. Hanson, would you call roll, please?
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Pressler?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Messerschmidt?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
And I agree with Mr. Messerschmidt. We do have a lot of things we need to talk about that are tough.
I think that's something we should probably make a plan tonight to schedule a workshop.
I'm all for it. We can talk about it.
I plan on, before the next meeting, we will definitely have a meeting, work session and I'm kind of gonna give it a little time to see how long this one's gonna be till she can get out. And I believe it's the first of the month. So, right around the first of the month, we'll get that scheduled.
Okay.
All right.
The next item is, we need a motion to approve the revenues and appropriations modifications.
Looking for a motion to approve the revenue and appropriations modifications.
It's a tongue twister.
So I'm a
Mr. York, do I have a second?
A second.
Mr. Messerschmidt. Discussion?
These include all the funds, and it's just really to catch us up because they weren't very complete when I started in January, and we had some funds in the negative, and they will be very fine-tuned by the next meeting.
Ms. Hanson, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Messerschmidt,
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard,
Yes.
Mr. Pressler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. Next item is motion to approve contracts with the Hamilton County ESC and the Butler County ESC.
I'm looking for a motion to approve the contracts with the Hamilton County ESC and the Butler County ESC.
So moved.
Mr. Messerschmidt, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. York, discussion?
They're mostly for special education services that we get from both of those ESCs, and they're dependent on our need, and they can change at any time as special education students come and go and their services change from year to year.
And I'm gonna make the suggestion or ask if we could continue to look at alternate ways to get some of our special ed needs met, to cut the cost from what Warren County's charging us. If Hamilton County and Butler County has some services, we can get away from some of the services we're purchasing at Warren County. I think it'd be a smart business move. We're facing increases that are unreasonable in my opinion, and I would hope that we would look at a way we could save money in that. Just a thought. And it looks like we're doing business.
That's Warren County specifically, I'll check into that.
Yes.
Okay. I haven't seen anything from them yet. Doesn't mean it's
I remember the last one, it seemed like it was a couple $100,000 higher than the previous contract.
Okay.
That's totally unbelievable in my opinion, for it to go up that much.
Mrs. Hansel, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Messerschmidt,
Yes.
Mr. York,
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard,
Yes.
Mr. Pressler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. The next item is to approve. We need to approve the contract with Shakely for our workers' compensation premium savings program.
Looking for a motion to approve the annual workers' comp group retrospect program.
So moved.
Mr. Messerschmidt, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Pressler. Any discussion?
Yes, what exactly is, this made no sense to me.
Well, there's, big groups try to get into programs to help cut workers' compensation or our premiums for BWC, for injured workers. And you can be in this program or there's another group program. We save more money with this one, although we get the money over a longer term. This company helps us with that, and they also help us with claims, and they go and represent us if people are unhappy with their claim and feel that it's not being handled or they didn't get the result they wanted. So this company represents us with workers' compensation claims and unemployment.
So which option are we?
We are in the premium savings, workers' compensation premium savings option.
It says option 1, option 2.
Well, I'll tell you, let me open it up.
Yeah, the one I'm looking at says group rating and group retrospect.
Oh, we're in group retrospect. It's the look back one. Group rating is the other one, but the savings isn't as much.
And that's the one that is.
It's the one we're on now, and it's the one we want to be on next year.
Any more discussion?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Hansel, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Messerschmidt.
Yes.
Mr. Pressler.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. York.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. The next item is authorized membership in the Ohio Purchasing Council of Governments, as presented.
So moved.
I'm looking for a motion, Mr. York. So I have a second.
Second.
Mr. Pressler. Any discussion?
Is there a cost to this?
No?
Good.
Should be.
Yeah, since they're bringing us together to spend our money, right?
Right.
Okay.
Any more discussion? Ms. Hansel, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. York.
Yes.
Mr. Pressler.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Messerschmidt.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. The next item to approve is a memorandum of understanding with the SROs first, it's with the Butler County Sheriff, I'm pretty sure that's this one, for next school year.
I'm looking for a motion for the memorandum of understanding with the SROs for school year 2022 and 2023.
So moved.
Mr. Messerschmidt, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Pressler? Any discussion?
Yeah, is this just a memorandum of understanding, or is there a contract actually with this?
I think the contract's embedded in the memorandum of understanding.
I would say that I'm really, from what I see and what I hear going on when we have an emergency or have this or that these folk do a really good job. And that doesn't always happen with SRO agreements. So we've been fortunate to get a group, I think a good group. So kudos to you guys. Doing a good job.
I think so too.
Thank you. Any more discussion? Mrs. Hansel, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Messerschmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Pressler?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. The next item is the agreement for the deposit of public funds with First Financial Bank and with Fifth Third Bank.
Looking for a motion for agreements for deposit of public funds with First Financial Bank and Fifth Third Bank.
Yes, 2 banks.
So moved.
Mr. Pressler, do I have a second?
A second.
Mr. Messerschmidt?
So why are there 2 banks?
Why are there
Because
2 banks?
when I was looking at changing banks from Fifth Third to First Financial, I got in the file and realized that our depository agreement with Fifth Third had expired in 2016. And they're good for 5 years, and you're supposed to renew them every 5 years, but ours hasn't been renewed. So I contacted them, and they would only go back to January of 2022 and start a new one, but hey, covers me. And then we got one from First Financial Bank because we're getting ready to switch to First Financial Bank, and we needed one there, so we have a 5-year one with them.
Are there any savings or any
Yes.
advantages to the, how significant?
We'll save $600 a month just in fees from Fifth Third to First Financial. But our big savings isn't monetary, but it's the service. So I'm not sure if I told you guys this story, but back about 4 payrolls ago, there was a problem with the direct deposit file, and we needed to pull it back from the bank and make a change. We just sent it. And we called, I was new here, I called the only number I knew, and the person didn't answer their phone, and we had no other number to call, and we were starting to panic. So we actually had to call SWOCA and ask them who of their clients banks with Fifth Third Bank, and they gave us another school district's name, and we called that school district and said, hey, have you ever had to pull your file back? They said, yes, it happens. And they gave us the number to call and what to do, and that's what we did it. So instead of Fifth Third Bank helping us, they were silent, we couldn't get a hold of anybody. And we've had other problems with Fifth Third Bank right here at the banking center in Trenton. You know, if a deposit comes in wrong, like somebody transposed 2 numbers the other day, so just calling us and saying, hey, they didn't write the right total. I had to actually go down there, change the deposit ticket for them, and as soon as I looked at it and wrote the right number down, I said, oh my gosh, they just transposed the first 2 numbers. But it didn't matter, and I had to physically go down there in person and fix it. Okay. At the same time, I got told that we weren't allowed to deposit coins unless they were wrapped. But they gave me some wrappers, and I said, well, thank you very much. And so these things that I asked First Financial when we just met with them Monday, are these things a problem with your bank? And they're looking at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, no, you will never be left. We have a help center that actually answers your telephone till 7 every night. And I've called the help number at Fifth Third before. When I first came on, it took me several weeks to get the account transitioned over to my name, which made me very uneasy during that time that previous treasurer's name was still on our account. No longer working here. Didn't seem to be a problem with Fifth Third. They didn't really see that was a problem, but it did. It scared me to death. And but I know that they like to say, oh, here's a manual, here's how to do it, but they don't want to give you the face-to-face service that First Financial does. So yeah, right off the bat, $600 a month, but then the services, you can't put a dollar amount on it.
Sure, I agree. Great, thank you for looking into
You're
that and
welcome.
doing the research.
You're welcome.
Ms. Hansel, would you call, any more discussion? Mrs. Hansel, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Pressler?
Yes.
Mr. Messerschmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. And I don't have any informational items this evening. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Next, we're gonna move to superintendent items.
Mr. Gabbard, first item I have is looking for a motion to approve the list of policies.
Looking for a motion to approve the list of board policies.
So moved.
Mr. Messerschmidt, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Pressler? Any discussion?
Are we grouping B, C, D, and E together, or just?
I would like to group B, C, and D together. After the approval on that, I definitely would like to group B, C, and D since there is no action needed.
Well,
We're on board policies.
Yes, we're on board
Yes.
policies
Yeah.
still right
So
now.
we're
still on A.
Yes,
Yes.
we have a motion and a second.
Any more discussion? Ms. Hansel, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Messerschmidt?
yes.
Mr. Pressler?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Mr. Gabbard, for items B, C, and D, I had them listed separately. Originally, Mr. Philpott was going to look for approval for his handbook. And after our discussion, we felt like the board needed more time to look through it more thoroughly. I know that, I believe the high school and the middle school are looking at the phone policy, as Mr. Chanik alluded to earlier, actually. So I would just ask that you would review this, and possibly, if we are going to have a work session between now and next month,
Okay.
we may want to have the principals there to answer any questions.
I'm looking for a motion to group B, C, and D
Just information.
together for information. Do we need to?
No.
Okay, we're good then.
Good. The last item, Mr. Gabbard.
I think this will be something good to go over during our work session.
I agree. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time talking about this
Yeah.
tonight. But I do think we all need to come prepared to have some pretty serious discussion around board policy on cell phone usage in the schools, because I agree with some of the comments that we heard in here tonight.
I have received a lot of comments from staff and administration, so
I know that, my experience in the classroom at Miami University, that there's nothing more distracting than being in front of a class with students out there going through their cell phone while I'm trying to lecture, so I think we've got some things to talk about.
So, you know, the code of conduct is different than board policy, right? So we would be looking at, we're talking basically administrative guidelines here versus board policy.
correct.
I shared with Mr. Kachanik, board policy is 5136 on personal devices. And I think there is a lot of discussion needs to go on, because if you've read 5136, it's robust in nature. It gives them a lot of leeway and authority to do what they need to do. I think it's a matter of implication of it. So, just my 2 cents. I've read it, and it's got teeth in it, but you gotta use them.
Sure. I think everybody's pretty much on board with cell phone, probably have. Mr. President, would you like?
Yes, Mr. Gabbard, item E, be looking for a motion to approve the gifted identification plan.
I'm looking for a motion to approve the gifted identification program for school year 2022-23.
So moved.
Mr. Messerschmidt, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Pressler, discussion?
This is something we do every year. I know Megan Brooke has done a great job with our gifted program. I'm sure you have any questions about it. Any changes, Dr. Thorpe?
Yeah,
pardon me, we actually added a couple of assessments on there that weren't in there previously, because now we will be looking to identify students in the area of creativity, as opposed to just the content areas that we had looked at before. And the previous assessments we used didn't really test for that, so we had to add a couple of, I couldn't name them off the top of my head, but I know that they're included in that.
They're highlighted in there.
Thank you.
Florence test of creative ability. Creativity has always been hard to assess. I hate to call it education an industry, but our world has been looking for a good identification tool for creative ability. It's been difficult, so over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of work around creating tests to try to identify that. It's a difficult area to identify.
I do have a question about this with the standards. Do we establish our own standards? Is that governed by the state? Where do the standards come from?
They're governed by the state, so we have to whole grade test at certain grades, and we test for subject specific for core subjects, and we also test for what they call cognitive ability, the COGAT. That's the little test where you have to like match the circles and do these it's like a 9-part, 10 minutes a piece. Takes a long time to do it. So you know we identify for cognitive, subject specific, and creative ability. Now we have vendor approved tests. If you look in there, you'll see all the different tests that you could choose from. We use Terra Nova for subject specific, and we use the COGAT for cognitive ability. So it's basically who we test and how often we test is dictated by the state.
So for the creative portion in here, I see some categories, the visual arts and music arts and things. Is that all part of the creative? Or?
Yes. And in the past, we've asked teachers, there's been a number of different ways, which is kind of subjective, where you can write descriptions about why you believe that this student is exhibiting creative ability beyond their classmates or peers. And I think the best way to describe it is we know that there's a difference sometimes in the creativity from one student to the next, and sometimes to the level that we believe it's a giftedness. But I say we as the educational world in America, trying to get a better gauge on how do we put numbers to that, how do we put a test to that.
So it is going to have some subjectivity.
Yes, it always has, and I think we're trying to put less of that in, but it's kind of like, how do you do that when you're dealing with creativity?
Right.
But there is an ODE rubric though, right?
Yes, and that's what we go by. It gives the teachers an opportunity to give input.
That's great. Yeah.
Any more discussion?
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Hansel, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Messerschmidt.
Yes.
Mr. Pressler.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. York.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Those are my only items, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bussner. This time, I'm going to look for a motion to move to executive session for some or all of the following reasons. To consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of an employee or official, or the investigation of charges or complaints against an employee, official, license, or student requests a public hearing. Preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with employees. Do I have a motion? So moved. Mr. Pressler, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. York. Mrs. Hansel, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Pressler.
Yes.
Mr. York.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Messerschmidt.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0 at 6:59 p.m.
All right, we are back at 8:34. We are going to go on to personnel items. We'll look for a motion to approve personnel items as presented.
So moved.
Mr. York, do I have a second?
I second.
Mr. Messerschmidt. Mrs. Hampson, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Messerschmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Pressler?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Now's the time to talk about these things you just passed out, Mr.
Okay, so you have two items. One is the Success newsletter. If you look, I don't know who in the world had the job of putting this together, but last Monday night was the graduation, and we had a board meeting on Tuesday when I got these. They already had pictures from graduation at Centos. When you look on the inside, you'll see a picture of Mr. Graff, and alongside him, you'll see an Edgewood grad, Mr. Sawtell. They do a really neat thing with their graduation in that they have a student MC for the programs, and he was the MC for the program. So he did a really outstanding job. Credit to Edgewood, and really proud of him that he was the person that was chosen to do that. So take a look at that. There's an old guy in there in Columbus. You can throw darts at that picture if you want to. And then this is an advertisement for a race that's going to happen in August. This car, the kids at Butler Tech built. It's a dirt tracker, and they're going to get sponsorships to put on the side of it, raise money. And if you want to go, this is a chance to get out there and support the Butler Tech Foundation because they buy tools. For the kids who can't afford, in the programs that require their own set of tools and such, they buy tools for them. So it's a really neat program. And that, even though that car is looks like a T-Bird, it's not a GM car, it's a T-Bird, but still, it's a race car, and it'll be fun to watch them. So I think I'm going to go myself. So if you all want to go, I don't know. Are we committing a crime if we all go to the race? I don't know, but we're going to have to take turns or something. I'm not sure.
Looks like there's room on that quarter panel for a
Public
Gabbard
event.
Construction sticker.
Yeah, you go. I think so.
I think I would be interested in being a sponsor for
There
that.
you go. Josh Steele Construction could fit on there somewhere too. So yeah. Tell Josh I just threw his name right there.
Thank you, Mr. York.
You're welcome.
Mr. Messerschmidt, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I think you can tell a lot about how a child progresses and how a child is influenced by watching their reactions to certain things. And I had the opportunity to take my daughter to the Spring Art Fair and get an opportunity to see the music and the singing and the art displays. And she actually got an opportunity to meet Mrs. Paulson, and she was thoroughly blown away by the experience. And she went home and she worked on several pieces of art as a result of what she saw that night. So I just thought it was a really good event. It was very well done, and I think it had an impact on my daughter based off of the reaction that I saw. So just wanted to share that I think it was very done by the middle school, everybody that participated in it, and was glad to be a part of it.
Thank you. Mr. Presley?
I don't have anything.
I'm just going to add a little bit here. I really enjoyed being part of graduation, and thank you to everybody that helped put all that on. And a lot of moving parts that a lot of people don't see. That's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive how Edgewood puts that on. But I didn't like to. Last month, I said some names, and I know I forgot a name. John Arnold. We know you're a big part of that program. I know I didn't say your name, so I'm giving you a shout out tonight, John. We're thinking about you. Also got to see somebody that wasn't sure we was going to get to see. It was great seeing you there, Doug, and wish you the best.
So
What about an update on Amy?
Amy is, had foot surgery. She'll be back next month. She's got a little bell at home. When she wants something, she just like rings it, and all of her boys come running, and her husband, and she's living life good right now. So, well, she'll be back next month.
Good.
So-
Jared, can I add something?
Yes, you sure can.
I know an email was sent earlier. There were some questions about going to the Edgewood Intermediate School this Thursday for an awards assembly for the 5th grade. And I just want to let it be known to parents that Ms. Harrison will be sending an email or some kind of message to the homes to allow them to attend the awards ceremony in person.
Great.
Good.
Yeah,
Thank
I'd like
you
to
very
see
much.
us work at getting closer to being back to normal as soon as possible, start getting parents involved, that'd be great.
Great. So at this time, I'm gonna look for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Pressler, do I have a second?
A second.
Mr. Messerschmidt. Mrs. Hansel, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Pressler?
Yes.
Mr. Messerschmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
It's 8:41.